Hi there, welcome to Lilly-Tree. Today we're going to make this wire wrap pendant. So let's get wrapping. For this project we're using 1mm diameter wire, which is 18 gauge, 0.4mm diameter wire, which is 26 gauge, and a bead of around 8mm diameter. And the tools we need are flat nose pliers, round nose pliers, bail making pliers are optional, and wire cutters. We're starting with 20 centimetres or 8 inches of the 1mm diameter 18 gauge wire. And we want to make a bend in that wire 7 centimetres from one end. Now I'll just start making the bend in the wire and then we can check the conversion of that 7 centimetres. So that 7 centimetres is just over 2 3/4 inches. And we want to fold that wire back on itself so the two sides are almost touching. Then we're going to turn the wire so the longest piece is on top. We'll grab each side with a pair of pliers and then just gently twist to separate those two wires out. And the long piece is sitting to the left. Then we're going to bend that long wire back over the shorter straight wire and create a nice curve. At this point we can check what the lower part of the pendant will look like by putting on the bead. And bear in mind that long wire will be bending back around again at the top. So once we're happy with the shape of that first curve, we can start weaving. I have a length of the 0.4 26 gauge wire here. I have 1.5 meters here, but I'm expecting to only use about 1 metre of it. The rest is just in case I change my mind and do something different. And we're going to start from the end of that weaving wire and place it through the gap that we've got between those two frame wires from back to front. We want to position it at the point where that fold is, and then wrap the curved wire 3 times. It is quite difficult to hold it at this stage, especially when I'm trying to show you what I'm doing. We just want to make sure those wraps are all tightly together. And we can actually wrap them a little way up that wire. And then push them back down again. So once we've got those 3 wraps where we want them, and they're sitting nice and tightly together, we can take our weaving wire across and around the straight frame wire. We'll take 1 full wrap around that straight wire, make sure it's all nice and tight, and then on our second wrap around, we're taking the weaving wire through between the 2 frame wires and back across to that curved wire. We're then going to wrap that curved wire 5 times. We want to keep making sure they're nice and tight together. And then after that 5th wrap, we're going to go back over to the straight wire again and wrap that twice. And each time we're moving between those 2 frame wires, we're taking the weaving wire down between them. Now this is a little bit of a different weave. I like to call it the comb weave. And you'll notice over on that straight wire, there's a bit of bare wire between the wraps. Whereas on the curved wire, all of the wraps are sitting close together. That's the main feature of the comb weave. So we're just going to continue wrapping 5 times on the curved wire, and then across and twice on the straight wire, up to where the 2 frame wires meet. Now if you want to have a bit better idea of the shape we're going to end up with, you can start curving that long wire back over again, and even pop the bead on, just to check that you're happy with the shape that's being created. And what we're going for here is that top curve being slightly larger than the bottom curve. I'm quite happy with that shaping, so we'll just continue with the comb weave. And with that narrowing gap between the two wires, we might just find our weaving wires slipping forward. So we might just need to make sure we hold those wraps where we want them. We've now wrapped up to where those two wires are crossing. I've done my 5 wraps on the curved wire. Because the two wires are now so close together, if I wrap that straight wire, there'll be a gap in the wraps on the curved wire. So I'm just going to continue wrapping a coil on that curved wire over the front of the straight wire. Now I've made a total of 15 wraps on that curved wire since moving back from the straight wire. But it doesn't really matter exactly how many coils you've got on there. I'm now going to go back to the straight wire and wrap twice over that straight wire. And you might notice, because we've switched sides, the weaving wire is now coming up between the two frame wires. And we're now about ready to add the bead. So just before we add the bead, we can get rid of that starting tail of the weaving wire. We just want to trim it as close as possible to the frame wire. Just make sure it won't catch. Now I'm just going to add the bead to show you where it's going to sit. And we can play about with the shape a little bit at this point. But the bead should be sitting on those last 2 wraps on the straight wire. And of course the next time we can weave between the 2 frame wires is going to be above that bead. So we're just going to continue wrapping a coil on this curved wire up to that point. We'll make sure those wraps are nicely compressed together. We'll just pop the bead on and check. And if we take the weaving wire across, we can see it's just sloping upwards slightly. So we need a couple more wraps on that curved wire. And then it should be going straight across horizontally. Now's a good time to double check that top curve that we're making. Then we can take that weaving wire across and wrap twice around the straight frame wire. Then back over and 5 times on the curved wire to continue our comb weave. And just make sure those wraps on the curved wire are nicely sitting next to each other. Now I'm finding that first wrap across is bouncing a little bit, but we can fix that later. So we'll just continue the wrap up to where the 2 frame wires cross again. Now we've got to that top point. And I've just realised that I want that curved wire to be behind the straight wire. So I'll just carefully swap them over and position it behind. And that has taken it out of shape slightly. So I just use my flat nose pliers to reshape that. It's not difficult to reshape it, but if you put it behind to start with, then you don't need to worry about fiddling with that. And then we can take the weaving wire twice around that straight wire for the last time. And then take it across and coil around that curved wire. And we'll continue with this coiling for the embellishment. So before we make the embellishment with that longer curved wire, we're going to create the hanging loop on the straight wire. So we can just angle that forward slightly. And then I'm going to use the second step on my bell making pliers, which is 3mm, so you could use the base of your round nose pliers if you wanted to. And we'll just take that wire around, and I'm looking to create a teardrop shaped loop. We can check its size. I think I want it slightly shorter than that. So I'll trim the wire there. And then we can complete that loop. And just make sure the end's in a good position. And the loop's straight. Now we can continue coiling on our curved wire, and we're going to bend it around and across the front of the pendant. We want a fairly small loop at the top there, and we want to wrap the coil just up to the point where that wire's crossed the straight wire at the back. Then we're going to take the weaving wire down through the weave, around that straight wire at the back, and then we want to make this as neat as possible, so I'm going to take it through that loop to the front, make sure those wires are sitting tightly together, and then continue coiling on that curved wire. Just make sure those coils are sitting tightly together. Now we're going to take this wire back around the back of the pendant so we can continue coiling for a fair way. Then we can bend that frame wire around. And I'm just trying to make these curves quite nice and smooth. And we want it tight to the back of the pendant. And I can add a few more wraps on there. Then we're going to bend this around so that it sits at the top of the bead. This will help keep the bead in position. And we want to get that coil to the point where it's crossed that straight wire again. And this is where we can sort out that springing wire at the top of the bead by taking that weaving wire down around that straight wire, and then up to the front again. And that is now holding those wraps at the top of the bead in place. Then we can coil that wire for a little way further and create a small loop at the top of the bead. We have about enough frame wire left to do this by hand, but we can use our flat nose pliers to help grip if we need to. I'm just trying to make that loop as small as possible. I'm going to put a couple more wraps on there, just so the whole of that loop is coiled. Then we can trim the frame wire. Gently flatten that down so the end's tucked in. Then we can trim the weaving wire. And I did only use just under 1 metre. We'll just make sure that end's tucked in so it won't catch. Now we could patina this with liver of sulphur to give it that aged look, but I think I'm going to leave this one as bright copper. So our pendant is finished. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, why not head to this playlist for more pendant tutorials. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.